Hello, you are listening to the All Girls School podcast. I'm your host, Victoria Barrett, a graduate from an all-women's college in Virginia. This podcast aims to highlight the diverse experiences and life journeys of graduates from all-women's colleges. Listeners can expect to hear candid conversations about a wide variety of topics. This podcast strives to be in an inclusive space, so some guests may identify themselves as non-binary or trans. I hope you're ready, because class is about to start. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the All Girls School podcast. I'm your host, Victoria Barrett. I use she, her pronouns. And in this podcast each week, I interview a guest who has attended and or graduated from an all-women's college. This week, I'm really excited. I have someone who I actually just recently met for the first time because she graduated before my time at Mary Baldwin. I have Janaire Jackson with me. Thank you so much for joining me.
Absolutely. I'm glad to be a part of this.
Yeah, I'm so excited. So we actually just finished running the Army 10 miler. Yeah, we're a little tired, but excited to do this interview. And I know listeners, for those of you who have been listening to all the episodes, you're probably wondering, how the heck did Janaire get here? And how did, me, someone who didn't even cross paths with her based on the timeline that we were in college, connect? Well, you're going to find that answer out later. So make sure you stay tuned. So first, kind of like what I always like to do, since this does mainly talk about going to a women's college, I kind of like to go backwards in time first. So make you step into before you got to college, if you could explain your background, where did you grow up, and maybe what were some of your passions and career interests when you were in high school before you went to college?
Absolutely. So where I grew up, I like to call myself an Army brat. My dad was in the military and retired from the military. So we moved and all over. But where we settled after my dad kind of decided he was ready to retire was in Griffin, Georgia. That is actually where my mom, born and raised, been there since the 2000s is when we moved back there. So been there since. That is actually where I predominantly call home. So moved back there, started 8th grade there. And then what kind of got me into my passions I can speak to today that kind of, go with what led me to Mary Baldwin College. Is I've always loved to be in leadership positions. I love doing things of that nature. It was always very challenging. I love just working with people. So when I went to high school, I decided to get into the junior ROTC program, and at Griffin High School is where I went. And then I did it the first year, obviously, as a freshman, just to see what that experience was like, to see if I would like it, and fell completely in love with it. So from there, I took it upon myself to try to get in every leadership position that I could in ROTC. But one of the coolest things I did in ROTC that I actually have not shared with a lot of people was I was a part of our drill team that was there in ROTC. So if a lot of folks don't know what the drill team is for an ROTC, we twirl rifles. And at Griffin High School, our all-women's female rifle team, we were every year dominated. We were the national champions. And so I got to experience that all 4 years there. That was a great time. And but the one thing I did also do my senior year that was such rewarding was I was the battalion commander for our RTC department. So that was very fun, very rewarding. Got to just lead people, a whole entire battalion, which was so exciting. And I just fell in love with just being in leadership in general. So it's kind of one of my biggest passions.
Oh, that's very cool. I feel like I didn't know much about JRTC because I didn't do it. So Can you explain a little bit about JRTC? Because I know of quite a few of the people I've interviewed have been in JRTC. So some listeners might not be as familiar with it because I didn't do JRTC.
Right. School. So joining JRTC, essentially how Griffin High School kind of ran their program is at least the first year, all freshmen had to take ROTC just to see if it was something that they wanted to do. But essentially when you went in your first year, class focused on basically learning about leadership and what that means, more so on the side of being a follower more than anything with leadership. So it was a lot of classes like that. Then you did go outside because it was Army base. So we did learn how to do a lot of the drill and ceremony type things that you see Army personnel do with marching around and things of that nature as a company. Because when each class came to class every period, it was a company size element. So with that, your sophomore year, you took on a leadership role of being a squad leader. And so you really learned, what it was to lead your squad and what it was really coming into the foundation of becoming a leader your sophomore year. And then your junior year, you actually became the first sergeant of a company. And some of the juniors didn't. They may have just stayed within the regular, companies. But you became a first sergeant most of the time. So you led one of the companies during that period. And then when you came to your senior year, you were on the staff or the battalion commander of the battalion XO, but either staff officers, and everyone their senior year was all staff officers. Everybody had a role within the staff. But one of the cool things too is that the entire staff and the entire leadership within the battalion, since you were a battalion size element, we planned military balls. We planned like the day that all of the freshmen would come in over a Saturday and get sized and get their uniforms, get issued to them. But one of the big things that culminated for each year is we had a huge inspection that would happen where Cadet Command, which our Cadet Command was based out of Savannah, Georgia, they would come and inspect your battalion. And you had to actually prepare for it. You had to march in front of them. You had to do an actual inspection where they would come and inspect your uniform. And then the ceremony ended with the entire battalion marching onto the field along with the staff. And you had to do it's almost like in VWIL when we had to do the parades. Yeah. So we had to march just like that, form up, follow commands, and we had to do a pass and review. Then after that, the Cadet Command leadership would basically tell you if your corps or battalion, passed their inspection for the year. So Griffin High School always passed is something that we were very prideful of. So we did do very well, but that's kind of what it is like to be at least in Army ROTC is how we ran things. It was a very cool and very rewarding experience.
Yeah, that's very cool. I was gonna ask, how big was your program? Because it sounds pretty big, and the fact that you were saying like freshmen had to take it. All freshmen had to take it. That's so.
We had at least between like 300 to 400 people that made up the battalion. Oh yeah. And then you would drop size after a while because of various things. Like, they still would get kicked out if they were, just too much of a problem or a challenge to handle within the program, or just natural, attrition of students not coming back to school, moving, whatever, it may be. But yeah, it was pretty decent size.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty big program. And your high school probably was a decent size.
We had a decent size high school. Yeah. We did. Yep. They actually ended up having, I want to say it was the start actually of my freshman year, or it may have been the year before that, but it was a recent point being is they actually had to open up another high school within Griffin. Spalding County is what it's called now, just because of the sheer size of the population growth in Griffin during that time.
So how big of an impact did JRTC have on your college search, and what was your college search like?
So the funny thing behind college, so I had it in my mind. I chose college last minute because I had it in my mind that I was not going to college.
Okay.
I told my dad, like, I actually wanted to go and do like a trade school. And I was like, I can go to a trade school and learn how to be like a plumber. I can learn how to be a welder, or something that seemed more interesting to me at the time. Of course, my dad shot that down. He's like, no, you're going to a real college is what he would say to me. So my junior year, I actually had to start thinking about, and this was towards the end of my junior year, I had to start thinking about and figuring out where I wanted to go to school. But one of the things I did know is if I go to college, I did not want to go to school in Georgia. I wanted to get out of my comfort zone. So that's kind of like where I live all the time, is out of my comfort zone. So I started searching to figure out what schools I wanted to go to. I knew I didn't want to go to a big university because I want to be able to have that one-on-one relationship with the professors. I wanted the professors to know my name, and me know theirs, basically. And so I started looking at smaller schools. And then one day, towards the end of the year, we had a college fair. So all of the juniors and the seniors had their direct times to go walk around the college fair during school. So I went and walked around the college fair, and I stopped at Mary Baldwin.
Oh,
we had a table. They had a table at Mary Baldwin in Small Oak, Griffin, Georgia. So I was like, okay, well, I will hear about the school. And what actually stopped me to talk to the lady that was there is she had a pamphlet on the table that had a picture of one of the cadets from VWIL. And I put my hand right on the pamphlet and I said, what is this? And she was like, I talk to you about it. So she spoke to me about it, and I took a pamphlet, talked to her more about it, and I signed up with her to come for an orientation day on that same day. And so literally the very next weekend, we left on a Friday, actually. We were in the car. It was me, my dad, and my younger cousin, and we were heading to Stanton, Virginia, to go visit Mary Baldwin College. And my dad the entire time was like, are you sure this is what you want to do? Like, you want to go 8+ hours away from Georgia to go to school in Virginia? I'm like, yeah, what's the big deal? It's fine. You're only 8 hours away. So we get there, and I fell in love with the campus completely, saw where we were going to live for our freshman year. I liked how small it was, just completely. I felt very welcomed by the faculty that were there. And eventually my tour ended with going to sit down with Dr. Brenda Bryant. So I sat and talked with her. And then I talked with the first captain at the time in the Corps, because I came during the time where it was almost time for some of the leadership to come back to start training to receive the incoming Knowles. So I talked to the first captain at the time and kind of completely sold me on the program. And I went ahead and confirmed and said, I accept coming to Mary Baldwin. So then we follow the process you need to follow, that you should have started from the beginning of applying to the school.
Yeah.
I applied super late, like super, super late to the program. So that's what kind of got me to Mary Baldwin. It was a last minute decision, but when I went there, I knew that's where I wanted to be and wanted to go.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
It's actually kind of similar. I was talking to Sarah McFarland, and she also was like a very last minute decision to go to Mary Baldwin. So that's very cool to see, like, the last minute decision. But I also think it's cool that you pointed out you were interested in trade school, because I definitely think there's kind of a trend now, like, of seeing trade school as like, that is like a viable option that, you know, was kind of told to like our generation, like, no, you don't want to do trade school, you want to go to college. But I definitely think trade school is also a viable option, so as well. So I think that's cool that you were interested in a trade school, because, you know, during that time period, kind of like, you know, you said your dad was like, no, I want you to go to a real college. So yeah, I think that's really cool. And I'm glad that we're circling back around to that, and we're advocating like both routes, which I think is very cool.
Absolutely. It's one of the things that even today, when young kids or just adults in general can't figure out like what they want to do, I like advocate for a trade school completely, because you essentially can walk into a trade school having zero experience on a craft and get training, get paid to learn how to do this particular trade, and then walk out the door learning an amazing craft, but also making a pretty decent living at the same time too. Yeah. So, yeah,
that's very cool. Okay, so once you got to Mary Baldwin, since it was a last minute decision, what did you decide to study? What did you end up majoring in?
Yeah. So first, thinking I'm a huge brainiac, I can do this. I decided I was going to try biology.
Mm.
So I went and tried biology. Granted, I'm a person that has always either had straight A's and maybe a B.
Yeah.
So I go do biology. I did well in biology in high school, so I should do well in biology in college. I did not.
Uh-oh.
I went to intro biology and I struggled through that class. My CALIC actually tried to tutor me with biology because she was a biology major.
Mm.
And I looked at her and I was like, Andrea, this is not for me. I thought I wanted to do biology. I thought I had aspirations of wanting to go into the medical field, but this is not for me. So I changed. Then the very next year, what I decided to do is I always, like I said in the beginning, I like people. I love being around people. I love talking to people. But most importantly, I love helping people out when they are just dealing with very challenging things.
Mhm.
So I decided to do psychology. That's what I did.
Okay, cool.
So I took up psychology, studied that in college, and completely enjoyed it. Had some amazing professors that I know are not there anymore
Mhm.
today, like Dr. Kibler, Dr. Nasasiu, such amazing professors who completely loved teaching us and just loved the field of psychology entirely. So it was a great, great, great experience.
Awesome. So, what ROTC program did you end up joining? Because for those listening, if you're in the VWIL program, at least for, I think, your first 2 years, you have to take some sort of ROTC through VMI, which the options are Army, Navy, and Air Force. And then through the Navy program, I think you can also do Marine Corps
Yep.
ROTC.
Yep. So I chose Army.
Yeah.
Like, why not? But I went the Army route through VMI and did that the first year and knew for a fact that I was going to do that for my next, 3 years while there. But what I will say with that too is I was still on the fence of wanting to commission into the military because I knew that after your second year, if you didn't want to commission, you could essentially not have to declare to take it. But so I went the Army route, and then towards the end of my freshman year, because I enjoyed the experience, obviously, I decided that I wanted to join the National Guard. So I went and did all the paperwork you would do with the National Guard recruiter that was at VMI. And I actually ended up getting a 3-year scholarship through the National Guard, which was perfect because Mary Baldwin was super expensive and probably still is super expensive. So I got a 3-year scholarship through Army ROTC for the Guard, joined the Guard, Virginia Guard, and I drilled there until I actually commissioned. So in Virginia.
Yeah, that's awesome. One of my sister-in-laws did a similar route with getting the National Guard scholarship, Erica Goodwin. So so she went that same route. And it's a great route. How did attending both an all-women's college and being an all-women's Corps of Cadets kind of shape both your academic and your personal experiences during your time?
No, absolutely. So I will say one of the things that I completely enjoyed going to an all-women's college, and I don't know if this is a common thing that other women would say, but I can see how I'm going to get to my point, but I can see how going to an all-women's college could probably make you a little intimidated when you go back and you're working around now a more diverse type of, population. Well, I will say for me, what Mary Baldwin did for me professionally and personally is made me a very confident, very sure woman. Like I just knew when I left Mary Baldwin, I left the Corps of Cadets, I knew who I was. And I honestly can say that it is actually my opinion. It's more challenging and it's definitely more difficult at times to lead women than it is to lead men. So I feel that, if you can go to Mary Baldwin, you can be a part of an all women's Corps of Cadets, and you can thrive in that type of environment, you can take on anything else in this world and do the same. Because Mary Baldwin and the Corps of Cadets has made me who I am today. And the skills that I learned being in the Corps, it's just amazing. Completely amazing. Like when I went into my unit for the first time as a lieutenant, the one question I got asked, and I actually still get asked today, is, were you ever prior service? I'm like, no, never prior service. They're like, you're just a different type of leader. We're not used to a type of, leader like yourself that is someone that came straight from college, straight from ROTC, and you have no type of military experience behind you. And I can just say that that's just a testament of being a part of a Corps of Cadets, because you live it every day and you learn the structure of what it is to, be a follower, be a leader, and to just know how to thrive in the environment that you are in, and know how to be on a routine, learn how to, have organization, learn how to manage your time, and then most importantly, learn how to listen to folks who have more experience than you, so that you can gain that knowledge and experience as well. So, yeah.
And you eventually in VWIL became first captain.
I did. Yeah.
So what were some of the challenges that you had as first captain leadership wise?
Yeah.
Especially like you said, it is challenging. I don't think people realize leading an entire group of women, especially like our Corps of Cadets,
right,
where, not everyone is going into the military. So you have to kind of embrace, like, how do you motivate?
Right. Right.
How do you just motivate people and get them to follow you?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's definitely is a challenge, you have every day. But I will say one of the things that I'm going to kind of respond differently to your question, and kind of tell you with what you said of how I got through that challenge.
Okay.
So the one thing that I did is I knew that it was very important for me as the first captain to go and get to meet everyone within the Corps. Yes, we're a small Corps. Yes, we grew up all together and all the way through leadership, and you get to know people, but I didn't personally know everyone. So whenever I would just regular day walking around the campus and I would see folks that I know that were either freshmen in the Corps, sophomore or up, excluding my sister knows I live with them every day. I need to sit and talk with them every day. But I would sit and talk with them at lunch. I would sit and talk with them at breakfast. I would check in to see, how are things going? How am I doing as a first captain? How are my sister Knowles doing as your leadership? What are some things that we can do differently? Just to try to get their thoughts and try to incorporate that into, if we would change things, to change it. But most importantly, I could take that to like General Bissell and sit and have a conversation with him to truly give him the background of how the Corps is doing and where I think we need to change things so it works, more effectively and more efficiently as a Corps. And then I would, the one thing too with folks who didn't want to necessarily join the military, it is a constant reminding them, hey, you're in this type of, Corps of Cadets. But the other thing too is having that humility to know that they're not. So maybe we don't need to take things as seriously as we do sometimes. Let's incorporate having, more time to enjoy ourselves. Instead of being so stuck on being so militarily focused on everything. But to that point too, our class president that we had at the time too, her, like, we're best friends to this day, Brittany Walker, but we had a very, very tight relationship. And that's the one thing that I asked her a lot to help me with, was taking the military side out and looking, as a class president who focuses more on the organization, the social aspect of things. How can we make sure that we're being inclusive across the board with everyone within the Corps? So, I think we did a pretty good job. Of course, not everyone's perfect, but that's essentially how I got through those barriers and those challenges of being the first captain. But just from the past experience of the past first captains that we had before I became a first captain, is people knew who she was because she stood in front of the formation, but people didn't really know who she was. So that's what I tried to do differently, even though a lot of folks you've met said I was very stern. I didn't smile a lot, but I was actually a very personable person. I just try to balance the both.
Mhm.
I knew when to put the hat on and be first captain, but knew when to take it off and just to be a person. Show humility.
I think what you just kind of went over of having that personal connection with, other cadets in the Corps transcends leadership in general. And I think
Yeah.
that's a lesson that a lot of people don't maybe necessarily understand is how important it
Mhm.
is when you're in a leadership position to get to know the different people in your organization and let them see that like you're a human
Right.
and that you genuinely care and you want to know what's going on in the organization. I think that's probably the biggest downfall of leaders that I've seen,
Absolutely.
is just not having the ability to connect with like their subordinates and the people working for their organization.
Agreed.
So I think that's
Agreed.
very cool.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, I wish I had started college a year earlier. So after you graduated college, what did you pursue career-wise? What
Yeah.
did your path look like
Yeah.
after college?
So my path was very interesting. So I commissioned into the National Guard in 2009. And then directly after that, I actually moved back home to Georgia. So I went from the Virginia Guard to the Georgia Guard. And I started off as a platoon leader in what is called a Brigade Support Battalion is where I started in the Georgia Guard. And when I got there, I kind of tried to figure out, okay, where my civilian career was going to go. I had no clue, like most folks, trying to figure out where their job was going to land. So I worked a few like odd end jobs here and there until I became on full-time orders with the Georgia Guard for quite a while. And I worked on our battalion staff, helping our S4 with a lot of logistical type things. I'm a logistics officer. So I did that for a good while, all the way up until my first deployment to Afghanistan in 2013, 2014. And then after that deployment, I came back and finally decided that I wanted to get my master's. So from there, what I did is I did take company command when I came back from the deployment. But after that, probably like a couple months later, more so leading into 2015, I would say, when we came back, I moved to Ohio and decided that wearing the shirt now, I decided to go to the Ohio State University to get my master's. So I got my master's in social work. And I worked as a social worker for about 5 years. I worked in the geriatric population at nursing homes. It was a rewarding, very challenging experience. Needless to say, but I completely loved it. But that was not my passion. I thought it was, but it wasn't. What actually became my passion is I really love being a logistics officer. And I love doing that full time. So I went back to doing that full time in the Ohio Guard once I officially transferred into the Ohio Guard back in August of 2016. And so I deployed with them overseas with the Sustainment Brigade. I went to Kuwait in 2017, 2018, came back, and then got on orders again and just did logistics planning with the brigade staff. And then eventually I got my full-time job. I call it my grown-up job, my forever job. I started working full-time for our state headquarters in the Ohio Guard as a logistics officer, handling maintenance type issues and managing all the facilities in our state. So that's kind of where my path led after Mary Baldwin. And I'm here today.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
One of the things we were kind of talking about, which I think is cool,
Yeah.
and maybe not a lot of people realize, because I know a lot of our graduates end up going active duty, is that there are a lot of opportunities through the National Guard and the U.S. Army Reserves to where, like you said, when you were at the very beginning of your career, sometimes like there are opportunities for you to jump on orders and do things full time, especially like if the civilian route is, you're trying to get a job, but it's not quite following through. Or if you just want to like pivot and do something else, there are those opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's very cool. And So you've fully converted to being an Ohioan. I feel like we were watching Ohio State clips yesterday.
Yes. I completely have. I am a Buckeyes fan all the way. OHIO.
So you see yourself staying in Ohio? You like that area?
I do love it. I live in Columbus, Ohio. It is a phenomenal city to live in. One of the things I love the most about Columbus, Ohio specifically is that the diversity there is amazing. I love it entirely. And just it's a somewhat semi-small city, but man, it makes you just feel like so like welcomed there, and businesses thrive there. Of course, Ohio State makes up the downtown area entirely, especially with their medical hospital they have there. But it's just an amazing place to be, and such great food. Like, oh my God, it's amazing. Cuisines that you can eat there, from just different types of cuisines, is just amazing. Like, I found out when probably not too long after I left that we actually had what am I trying to say? An Afghan restaurant there, and I was like, how did I not know this after living here for 8 years? I have not gone to this restaurant. But if you think of a country, Columbus probably has a restaurant that's there.
Yeah. That's always a sign of like a good place to live, if you can get like any type of cuisine. And it's a good sign of diversity. That's like the main reason I came back from Colorado, to be in the DC area. Like, I could have chosen to live a little closer to my family.
Right.
But I wanted to be somewhere that was diverse. So I totally get that. So you went to Ohio State, which is a very large public university. Yep. How did that compare going to like Mary Baldwin?
It was was it intimidating at first? Absolutely. So I drove to the campus, I don't know how many times, to figure out where I needed to park, to walk my path of where I needed to go to school. And I even walked into the building to see where my classroom was for all my classes, so I knew exactly where to go because it's such a huge campus. And then the other thing to add is the transit system that they have there, because they have buses that take you where you need to go based off where you park. Okay. So a lot of logistics for a big university, but the plus side of going to grad school there is that the class size was so small.
Yeah, that's good.
So that was a plus, but it was definitely very intimidating at first. But now when I go back there, it's like a small university to me, because you're just familiar with the area. But yeah, it was very intimidating at first.
Did you get to go to football games?
Oh, I sure did. I had season tickets.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I have not actually been to like a big college football game. It's on my list. Notre Dame's pretty high on my list. I grew up liking Notre Dame. Probably because it's the Fighting Irish and I have red hair. So yeah, a big college football game is on my bucket list for sure.
It is a great time. Like, folks talk about how fun NFL football games are, which they are. Don't get me wrong, especially the tailgating. But tailgating at a college game it's amazing. Just an amazing experience, because schools go all out. Like they go all out, and just the atmosphere of going into the stadium and seeing the kids play is just amazing. To see the talent on the field, that that some of them are going to go into the NFL, and you'll be able to see them play in the NFL. But it's just a good time.
That is very cool. I do think Ohio State had someone with the last name Barrett.
Yeah.
Not too long ago.
JT Barrett.
JT, yeah, JT. Yep. I was like, oh, JT Barrett. Yep. Yep. So now we're going to get to the part of like, how did we end up connecting?
Yeah.
Part of the answer is someone who's napping right now. Her name is Amanda Harrison, who was in the pilot. How did you meet Amanda?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
For sure. So Amanda and I are both actually at Fort Leavenworth right now. We are at ILE, CGSC, to finish, our next professional military education. So how we met, we had a sustainers like LPD.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to go to it, and we met through a mutual friend. And he told me like, hey, I'm going to introduce you to my friend Amanda. She's pretty cool. She's pretty dope. And I was like, okay, cool. Look forward to that. And so he told me her name. So I actually went on Facebook and I was looking through our CGSC class 2024 page we had. And I was just looking at folks' names to see, do I know a name here? Maybe, probably not, but worth the look. So I go to look. And I'm strolling down, I come to Amanda Harrison, and I see we have mutual friends. And I was like, is the Amanda that he is going to introduce me to? So I click on it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then I see she has a lot of friends and folks that went to Mary Baldwin, and I start clicking more, and I see who her calic is. I was like, her calic is Thurston. I was like, world. I said, but maybe it's a different Amanda. It could be somebody else, and maybe she's not a part of our Facebook page yet or something. So get to the sustainment LPD, and I get there. I walk in, and I see Erica Goggin.
Yeah.
So I see her walk in, and I'm like, okay, that's Erica. I'm gonna go speak to her in a minute. Well, then I see she's sitting at a table with a whole bunch of other folks that clearly they all know each other. And then I see who I think Amanda is, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna go talk to her too and say, hey, VWIL too. Well, then I see her and Erica like really know each other. And I was like, okay, well, I'll go check it out. So I walk over and I just step in front of Erica, and she's like staring at me like really confused. And she goes, no way. Is this who I think it is? And I'm like, I don't know. Who do you think it is? She was like, First Captain Jackson, Janaire Jackson. I was like, that's me.
Yeah.
So she gets up and gives me the biggest hug. And then Erica goes, Amanda, do you know who this is? She was in your notebook. And and she goes, no. And she's, I don't, wait, that's First Captain Jackson? I'm like, hey. And so I was like, so we just started from there, started talking, and we just connected like so well. I have to agree and say Amanda is a very dope person, even though she's challenging at times. But we have just, in the short amount of time we've gotten to know each other while there, we have definitely developed a very amazing friendship. And I'm just so glad that I've met her. And that's what brought us here.
Yeah.
Because as we got to know each other, she asked her group who's all running the Army 10-miler. And I was like, and so from then we're like, all right, we're going to plan to go together. And so it's been cool since then. So yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. And yeah, I remember your name is the very first, because like in the Knoll book, which is a book that like freshmen in the Corps of Cadets and VWIL have to, study, and we get quizzed on, because of when you graduated, you were like at the very top of the list.
Oh, wow.
So,
okay.
Yeah, so it was always like, and I feel like the class of 2012 liked you a lot, because they would always ask like that question.
Yeah.
So I feel like I always had to answer First Captain Jackson a lot.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. So to me, like, yeah, I was like, yeah, I remember from the Knoll book. So it's really cool to actually like put the name to the face. But then when I saw your face, I was like, she's in the brochures. She's in the brochures. And like, I understand why, because like Sarah McFarland said this when we ran into Sarah at the 10-miler, like, you look very sharp and like well put together in the uniform. So it makes sense.
Wow.
Put her on the brochure. She like,
wow.
Yeah.
I actually didn't know I was on the brochures, to be honest with you. I had no clue. So this is the first for me. When Sarah said it earlier, I was like, oh, they put me on the brochures.
Yeah, you're on the brochures. Unless they've changed them or updated them since I've been there. You are on the brochures.
That's incredible. Wow. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you're famous. So you remember when you looked at the brochure or that pamphlet and said, what's this? Now, when other people are getting recruited, they're seeing your face.
Oh, wow.
And saying, what's this? Yeah, it's like
that's
cool.
Circle. It is a full circle.
That's very cool. All right. Okay. So we're going to move on from college, from VWIL. We're going to jump into some other topics. Oh, just kidding. we're actually going to go back. It is a little college related.
Okay.
So if you could go back in time and give your college self some advice, what would it be?
Oh, man. This is actually a challenging question for me because I completely enjoyed my college experience, but I guess just kind of thinking of one thing, I definitely wish I would have enjoyed, like I really enjoyed my junior year and my senior year, but I really wish I would have allowed myself to really enjoy freshman and sophomore year more of like hanging out with my sister-in-laws more. Because I definitely bonded with them where I could, but not with all of them because I decided it was the most great idea, I guess you can say. I thought it was a great idea. And to this day, I don't know why they allowed me to do this. I took so many credits my freshman year and my sophomore year. It was like 20-something credit hours a semester. Wow. So I lived and breathed and walked to school. That's what I did. I would start class at 8 o'clock in the morning with little breaks here and there. I lived in the library every Saturday, almost all day Saturday until like dinner time. I was doing schoolwork and just burning the midnight oil a lot. And the times that I would sleep was actually during the day between the breaks between classes.
Oh, wow.
So I stayed pretty busy, and I did not go out and socialize a lot like I should have. So if I would say, just going back in time to myself, I would tell myself, don't do that. Take the time to really embrace and enjoy the people around you and get to know everyone around you. And that became actually one of my focal points that I did do my junior and my senior year. I mean, because the plus side of that, I had to find classes to take, especially my senior. I had to find stuff to do just to throw on the schedule so I could still be a full-time student. I actually took racquetball.
Ooh, fun.
I don't know how to play it.
Oh.
Well, I don't remember how to play, but I took it in racquetball. I was like, oh, this is a lot of fun. This is a great workout. But yeah, if I would go back, I would tell myself that, just slow down, Janaire. You don't need to to take on so much. Just enjoy, the moment around you and be present. So
I think that kind of segues into like another point of where we were talking earlier about work-life balance.
Absolutely.
You were specifically mentioning it for the guard, but in general, do you think that experience has kind of shaped and informed your efforts around trying to have a better work-life balance as an adult?
No, absolutely. It definitely has, because I think it's important to have that balance. I know there's folks out there that may disagree with me on that, but especially, even if you have a family or if you don't have a family, it's very important to take time for yourself and just to be present in the moment because not doing that can really, 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 really affect you in the end. So one of the things that I kind of live by, CJSC is a disclaimer to this point because you can't do that. You have a lot of schoolwork to do. But what I try to do every time when I leave work is when I physically leave work, work stays at work. I don't like to take it home. I like to make that be my time to just completely be present in the moment and do things that I enjoy doing when I leave the building for the day. It's very important to do because it allows you to have that balance. It allows you to have a more quality of life. Instead of always just working. It's very important to do that, especially for your mental health. It's important. So,
yeah, I think our generation has learned that more so than
yes.
I think a lot of our parents and grandparents would just like work themselves into the ground, whereas we're starting to really change our mindset and really value that work-life balance.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's so important. It is. There is a world out there that people are just completely, well, not more today, folks are not, but it's important just to enjoy where you are. Go travel, go do things, experience things. I'm also a big believer that I work to live. I don't live to work.
Mhm.
That is very important to do because your quality of life is so important.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, we chatted about going to an all women's college. So I'm curious if you had the chance to sit down and have dinner with three women who are either from historical figures, or maybe like fictional characters,
Hmm.
or even like present day, like
Yeah.
real people, who would you want to sit down with and chat with?
Absolutely. So I had to really think on this one. But what very interesting historical fact that I recently was made aware of this past summer, actually. So there is a unit this is back during World War II, when women were starting to become into the military.
Mhm.
And so the unit was called 6888. They were a postal battalion. A lot of folks don't know about them, but they were an all-Black women's unit, and they actually were tasked with going over to Germany. Is where they kind of went. Well, more so over to Britain, I guess you can say. But they were in charge of basically coming up with a better system to distro out mail out to our troops during World War II. And that's a little tidbit of history a lot of folks actually don't know about because they actually don't get a lot of credit for it. But that's not the main significant event of what brought me to wanting to sit down with four women, actually. Okay. So I'm in the middle of reading a book, and I tried so hard to remember this book, but it is about these four women. So simultaneous to the 6888 being overseas, doing what they were doing, there was another event happening back here in the United States. So a lot of women during this time, during like 1942, 1945, didn't really have a lot of the equal rights in the military, especially Black women in the military. But when they were recruited into the military, they were recruited in saying that they would be able to do medical type jobs. Yeah. And a lot of them went to school for those particular type of professions. But when they joined the military, essentially what they ended up doing is still doing a lot of the jobs that they did before they joined. So janitorial things, cooking, cleaning, scrubbing floors, doing orderly room type duties, and none of them were doing the promised medical and technical jobs that they were told that they would do if they were to join the military. So a lot of them, this is back in March of 1945, I want to say. So a lot of them went on strike, started protesting about it, trying to get things to change. Eventually, unfortunately, what happened is they were coerced to stop doing that because they were told that they would be court-martialed and discharged from the military. So most of the women stopped protesting and went back to work, except for these four women. So I wrote down their names because I didn't want to forget either of them. So they were Privates Mary Green, Anna Morrison, Johnny Murphy, and Alice Young. So what they did is they did not return back to work. They continued to protest, to fight for equality, and they did get court-martialed, and they were told that they were going to get the maximum punishment for what they were doing. But what ended up happening is because this became such a huge publicity across the United States that a lot of folks rallied behind them and basically told the military, you are not going to kick them out of the military. You are not going to issue them the maximum punishment because what you're doing is not right and is wrong. So what ended up happening, so the NAACP got involved in it to help with the whole court-martial. So it eventually got overturned. They did not get punished. They returned back to work. A lot, unfortunately, did not change, but they stood their ground entirely through the entire process, went through their court-martial with so much poise and so much honor. And so if I could go back and sit and talk to all four of these women and have dinner with them, I would just want to talk to them and just get to know and understand, like, what was that like? What made you want to keep standing your ground and not wanting to back down when you easily could have? just to hear their story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they made a huge impact.
They sure did.
Literally changed the trajectory.
Yep.
By
they sure did.
being brave enough and having that courage to like continue to
Yeah,
protest.
absolutely.
So, yeah.
Yep.
That's an awesome story.
Yep.
I have actually heard of the 6888.
Yeah.
So I was a special education teacher for
Okay.
3 years. And last year I had a reading intervention class, and there's this website called News ELA.
Okay.
And there's different little articles, and like you can change like the Lexile level for different reading levels.
Okay.
And so I found one about the 6888. And so we read that one in
That's
my
incredible.
class. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a huge backlog, and they created their system and they cleared that backlog
Sure did.
for mail,
Yep,
which is
they
really
sure
cool.
did.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's really cool. All right. Okay. So, I was hoping, because I know everyone said, well, at least Sarah said you were a little more serious in the core. So
Yeah.
what might be like a fun, quirky fact about you that no one knows, or maybe not many people know?
Yeah. So what I will say, so one of the things that's very near and dear to me, so back in college, I actually was not very, I was not in very good shape. That was definitely a challenge for me. So ever since then, I've made it my goal to try just to change my lifestyle. Excuse me. Get some water.
Yeah, that's what it's here for.
So I wanted to make a lifestyle change and to figure out how can I make doing fitness fun?
Yeah.
Now, granted, I know we ran. That may not be the funnest thing, but there are other things that you can do to enjoy fitness. So I really love indoor cycling. Like, it is a passion of mine. I have aspirations of wanting to become a spin instructor. So that's something I'm telling myself after I retire, if I'm still in good shape, God is willing to let me still thrive in that way, I'm going to become a spin instructor, and that's going to be my income after I retire. That's what I tell myself now. But so I'm a part of a studio back home. It is called Melt House of Fitness. And they do a lot of indoor spinning. And some folks may have seen it before, but it's more choreographed. And you're not just spinning on the bike, standing up, sitting down, standing up. You're actually like, it's almost like dancing on the bike. And it's the funnest thing that you could ever do. But the fun concept of it is almost like hot yoga. So you're spinning in a room that's 80 degrees. For like 45 minutes up to an hour. So that is like, has been one of the funnest things I've discovered to ever do. And I just love it so much. I miss it entirely now that I'm at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, because they have a studio that's very similar in Kansas City, but it's like an hour drive. And so I'm telling myself that probably on a Saturday next year, when school is not so strenuous, I'll take a drive down and see if it gives me the little oomph that Melt House of Fitness does back home in Ohio. So
I have done those exact same type of spin classes when I was stationed in Alaska. I think it's called Anchorage Cycle. But yeah, the winters there are very, not as, yes, they're cold, but it's like the darkness really sets in. And honestly, those spin classes were the only thing that could like kind of pull me out of the funk, especially in the winter, because they are a lot of fun. I'm not like someone that says is a dancer, but I liked like the rhythm rides.
Yes, agreed.
And like the movements and stuff like that, because I feel like it ultimately is a good distraction from, you know, the cardio that you're doing, because you're burning a lot of calories. It's hot. But it's a lot of fun, and I would love like the different playlists that the instructors would have. Then I'd be like, and they would post them on like Spotify and stuff like that, and I'd be like, I want that song, that song.
That's exactly. So what I do. So now when I do go into the gym, because the gym back at Leavenworth, they do have like spin classes, but they're just not the same, unfortunately. But when no one is teaching class, I will go to the gym and I will go in there because they do have the same spin bikes that the studio back home has. And to your point, I have taken a lot of the instructors' class or song lists and just download it for myself, and I will go and just spit on the bike myself. But yeah, but
Very cool.
It's so much fun.
Yeah. I used to go to one in Colorado Springs too.
Yeah.
Called Psychology Studios, but spelled like cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And they actually like every now and then would do like an instructor's course. So like anyone who was interested, like I think it was either once or twice a year.
Yeah.
They would do like a 2-3 day period where they would, just give people kind of a crash course on how to be an instructor, which I think was really cool.
I know the studio back home does the same. I just, finding the time. Yeah. But I'm just like, that's a retirement.
It does sound like a really great retirement gig.
Yeah, I'm telling you.
Very flexible schedule.
Yeah.
Listening to music, motivating other people. You still get to use your leadership skills.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm manifesting it for you. I'll come to a class too, because like I said, I love those classes.
Mm-hmm.
They're just a little expensive. That's
they are.
The only,
that's
the only
very
downfall.
True. That is very true.
Yeah. All right. Okay. All right. So this is a podcast, and we're not. This question isn't just about podcasts, but do you have any favorite books, movies, and/or podcasts that you've watched or are listening to?
Yeah, so I actually have a recent book that I read before going to Leavenworth. So I like to read a lot of self-help books, just because I always like to do a lot of reflecting to see, how can I improve as a leader, but also how can I improve personally as well. So I read a book. It was called A Traveler's Gift by Andy Andrews. And so the book basically talks about these 7 principles that a person should try to incorporate in their day-to-day life. So essentially the main character, I think his last name was Johns. He and his wife are going through a very hard time. Mm-hmm. He had just lost his job. She was a stay-at-home mom, and they were trying to figure out how to make ends meet. And one of their daughters did I can't remember the sport off the top of my head, but she did a very expensive type of sport. So they were trying to figure out how they're going to just figure out life, now. And so he just kind of was not dealing with everything very well. And he had been working for this company that he had been working with for a very long time. And essentially they laid people off. And he just didn't know what he was going to do. And so he kind of just fell off the deep end, unfortunately, and got into a very bad car accident. And it kind of put him in a coma. And so the author in the book takes you through what John's experienced during his time as a coma. And he described each principle. And through each principle, he went back and saw historical figures back in time that helped shape his life. So Abraham Lincoln, he went back during the Civil War specifically, talked to Robert E. Lee, the battle for Gettysburg, like all of this stuff. They talked to he talked to key figures that kind of helped shaped these principles, which I thought was pretty neat. So I'm going to look down and kind of read them because I don't want to forget them. So the first one was take responsibility, seek wisdom, take action, make decisions, choose to be happy, forgive, and then last, persist without exception. So I consider I try to live by these every day and kind of, not to go into detail about each of them. I'll just encourage people to read the book because I will not do them justice. But how I look at these 7 principles, I think it is very important for all of us to, most importantly, we all go through very challenging, hard things in our lives. And it is very easy for us to choose to look at it negatively when you can look at it as an opportunity for you to grow as an individual. And sometimes you will never get the answer to why things happen the way they do in your life. But what's important is that you can always choose to be happy. And you can take responsibility sometimes for all of the challenges that are happening in your life, and as an opportunity for you just to persevere and kind of just get through what's happening, because all things are temporary. They're always temporary, but it's always about how we respond that makes them impact our lives, either negatively or positively. So this book is a very powerful book. And it can definitely give you perspectives of how to look at things differently, and just not to take things for granted all the time. So
that's very cool. It kind of reminds me of this quote. Well, I was listening to On Purpose with Jay Shetty. He was interviewing Becky G. She's a musician. And one of the things she was talking about was like mindset, and she was talking about how you have to change your mindset from things are happening to me to things are happening for me.
yes.
So
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
like, and that's like a huge difference, because yes, these things could be happening that are negative, but ultimately having, that foresight and that understanding that ultimately at the end of the day, they're happening for you and they're making you stronger.
Absolutely.
And better.
Yep.
Like once you get through them.
Yep. That is so true.
Mhm.
And when you kind of take on that mindset, it also gives you the reassurance and the confidence that you can get through what is currently happening in your life.
Yeah. I'm excited. I'm going to read that book.
It's an amazing book.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
All right. Well, we are right around an hour, which is perfect. This is like, wow, this is the best timing I've ever had without actually looking at the clock. So my last question for you is, do you have anything or anyone you want to plug or give a shout out? I know some people might have, like, if they feel comfortable, they can share like social media stuff, but sometimes just the opportunity to give some shout outs to anyone.
Yeah. So I would say like the one person that I definitely want to give a shout out to is my dad. So I am a daddy's girl, but I can definitely say that the older that I have become, the closer that the relationship between me and my father has become. We don't talk very often on the phone, but I will definitely say we talk more than we did in the past, which is amazing. My dad is an incredible man, and he loves his girls in and out, like he loves us to death. But you talk about a man who is so humble and so accepting, so loving and so caring. And just the way that he lives his life every day is so amazing. It's like as if nothing ever gets in his way to challenge him. And he has I'm just so blessed and so grateful to have a man like that in my life. He's an incredible human being.
Yeah, that's awesome. Shout out to Mr. Jackson. All right. Anyone else you want to plug?
Yeah. So I have a few people, but I'll say one that I definitely would, I'll plug the few that I want to plug. So I have two of my sister-in-laws who have been my everything as well. If there's two people that know me through thick and thin, it's Brittany Walker and Stephanie Valise. They actually were, I said sister-in-laws, they were in the Corps. We can literally go months without talking and get on the phone and just pick up where we all left off. Yeah. And I'm so fortunate, so blessed to have them. They have helped me through a lot of rough things that have happened throughout my life. And I just love and appreciate them. Like, I love them so much. They are truly an amazing women. The last person I would definitely shout out as well, her name is Stephanie Lafrada. We met in the Ohio Guard. We've been friends now for about 2-3 years, I would say. She's another logistics officer and just the most amazing professional that you could ever meet. But we developed a very close personal relationship. And having someone like that you can have a personal relationship and professional relationship is amazing. When I was a battalion XO, she was a battalion SPO for a brigade support battalion. And, typically people are used to those two people, either they have a good working relationship or they don't. And there's, that beef between the SPO and the staff. That was not that case with us at all. It was our professional relationship that grew our personal relationship, and it was amazing. It's so amazing today to have a friendship like that to come out of that. So yeah, she's awesome.
That's very cool. Well, We are at about that time.
Yeah.
It's flown by. This has been a great conversation. I've gotten to know more about you as well, which has
Absolutely.
been very cool. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it. And I know at least me and you will be running the Army 10 miler. Harrison potentially could be retiring. Stand by to see if she officially announces that or not. Listeners, I'll be sure to put it on the Instagram if she does make her retirement official. If she does not, then she will be back next year as well for the Army 10 miler. All right.
That's
well,
funny.
Thanks again.
I've enjoyed it. Thank you for having
All
me.
right. Awesome. Thanks for listening to the All Girls School podcast. But before class is over, please take a moment to subscribe or leave a review on Apple or Spotify podcasts. If you enjoy video content, head over to our YouTube channel at All Girls School Podcast, where you can watch and listen to each episode. You can also follow us on Instagram at All Girls School Podcast, and you can email us questions, stories, and more at theallgirlsschoolpodcast@gmail.com. That's it for today. Class is dismissed.